September 15, 1944, Camp Hearn, Texas. Unteroffizier Werner Burkhardt pressed his face against the chain-link fence, watching in disbelief as a man was thrown violently from the back of a bucking horse. The animal, seemingly trained for maximum violence, twisted its body in ways that defied natural horse behavior. 3 other men on horseback immediately converged on the fallen rider, executing what appeared to be a practiced rescue maneuver, while the aggressive horse was cornered and controlled. Burkhardt turned to his fellow prisoner, Feldwebel Kurt Metzger, who had served with the 21st Panzer Division in North Africa. "They're training cavalry assault tactics," Metzger whispered in German, careful that the American guards might understand. "Look at the coordination, the way they isolate and neutralize the mount. This is advanced combat training." What neither German soldier understood was that they were watching the Robertson County Fair and Rodeo, a purely civilian entertainment that had been running annually since 1909. The men weren't soldiers at all, but ranchers and farmhands competing for prize money and local prestige. The violent bucking horses weren't military assault training, but bronc riding, a sport that predated the Civil War. Within hours, this misunderstanding would spread through the entire prisoner of war compound, creating a mythology about American military preparedness that would profoundly affect German morale. The confusion was understandable for men shaped by total war. In Germany, every able-bodied man was either in uniform or in war production. Horses had been requisitioned for military transport years earlier. The concept of using valuable animals for entertainment, of allowing working-age men to engage in dangerous sport for no strategic purpose, simply didn't exist in their frame of reference. Burkhardt had been captured at Kasserine Pass in February 1943, part of the Afrika Korps collapse in Tunisia. For 18 months, he had witnessed American abundance that contradicted everything Nazi propaganda had taught him about American weakness and decadence. But this display of what he believed was military training disguised as entertainment represented something more disturbing. It suggested that Americans were so confident in their military superiority that they could publicly demonstrate advanced combat techniques without fear of intelligence gathering. The rodeo had drawn over 3,000 spectators from across Robertson County and beyond. Families arrived in pickup trucks and automobiles, their numbers alone shocking the German prisoners who could see the parking area from their compound. More vehicles than an entire German Panzer Division possessed, owned by ordinary civilians who had driven to watch what the prisoners believed was military training. "Count the horses," Metzger instructed. "I've counted at least 40 in the holding pens. Trained war horses, maintained in perfect condition, used for training exercises that simulate combat scenarios." What he was actually counting were bucking stock, rodeo horses and bulls bred specifically for their ability to unseat riders, animals that would be utterly useless for actual cavalry operations but were worth thousands of dollars to rodeo stock contractors. The German prisoners watched as a cowboy was thrown from a bull, an animal that weighed nearly a ton. Clowns, men dressed in baggy clothes and painted faces, immediately distracted the bull, allowing the fallen rider to escape. This, to German military minds, appeared to be training for infantry support tactics. The clowns were obviously simulating supporting infantry, drawing enemy attention while the primary assault element withdrew and regrouped. "The precision is remarkable," Burkhardt noted in the hidden diary he kept against camp regulations. "Each man knows his role exactly. The riders execute their assault. The supporting elements provide cover. The extraction happens in seconds. This is training for coordinated rapid assault tactics. They disguise it as entertainment, but we know better." The camp's German officers debated the implications that evening. Hauptmann Friedrich Weiss, the senior German officer at Camp Hearn, had initially dismissed the prisoners' reports as exaggeration. But after interrogating multiple witnesses, he became convinced that something significant was occurring. They're training cavalry in plain sight, Weiss told his assembled officers. Think about the implications. They have so many men, so many horses, such surplus capacity that they can conduct military training as public entertainment. Every weekend, thousands of their citizens watch these exercises. The population becomes familiarized with military tactics, prepared psychologically for warfare. What Weiss didn't understand was that rodeo had evolved from the working practices of cattle ranching, not military tactics. The techniques the Germans were observing, roping, riding, wrestling steers, were skills developed by vaqueros and cowboys over centuries of managing livestock across vast ranges. They bore no relationship to military training whatsoever. The prisoners began analyzing each rodeo event through their military lens. Calf roping became reconnaissance and prisoner capture training. The cowboy would identify a target, pursue it on horseback, demonstrating mounted pursuit skills, rope it, demonstrating accurate weapons deployment, then dismount and secure it, demonstrating ground combat proficiency. The entire sequence took less than 10 seconds, suggesting extensive training and natural aptitude for combat operations. Steer wrestling, where cowboys leaped from running horses onto running cattle and threw them to the ground by twisting their horns, appeared to be training for mounted assault tactics. The coordination required between the hazer, the rider helping guide the steer, and the wrestler seemed to mirror military small unit tactics. Bull riding, where men attempted to stay mounted on 2,000-pound bulls for 8 seconds, was interpreted as advanced combat endurance training. The violence of the experience, the obvious danger, the requirement for split-second timing and absolute courage, all suggested military preparation. The prisoners noted that many participants were thrown and injured, yet immediately stood and saluted the crowd, demonstrating the stoic warrior culture Americans were cultivating. They're building a warrior society, Metzger concluded. Every weekend, in towns across America, they conduct these training exercises disguised as entertainment. The population watches, learns, absorbs military values. The participants, all volunteers, subject themselves to extreme danger to develop combat skills. The reality was that rodeo participants were mostly ranch hands, farmers, and working cowboys who competed for prize money that might total $100 for a weekend event. Many held regular jobs and rode on weekends. They weren't preparing for war. They were continuing a cultural tradition that had existed since the open-range era. Their skills with horses and cattle were valuable for ranching, not warfare. But to Germans who had been mobilized for total war since 1939, whose entire society had been reorganized for military production, the concept of elaborate physical contests serving no strategic purpose was incomprehensible. Everything in Nazi Germany served the state. Athletics were paramilitary training. Youth groups prepared children for military service. Even cultural activities were designed to strengthen national will. The misunderstanding deepened when prisoners learned that similar events occurred across Texas and the entire American West. Camp Hearn's prisoners corresponded with POWs at other camps who reported witnessing identical training exercises. The conclusion seemed inescapable. America had created a nationwide military training program disguised as entertainment, involving hundreds of thousands of participants and millions of spectators. They've militarized their entire culture without appearing militaristic. Hauptmann Weiss wrote in a report he hoped to smuggle to German intelligence. While we train soldiers in obvious military facilities, Americans train their population through cultural activities. The psychological advantage is enormous. Their citizens don't feel regimented, yet they're absorbing military skills and values. The truth was precisely the opposite. Rodeo represented a civilian culture so robust that it could devote enormous resources to entertainment that served no military purpose whatsoever. The horses, the facilities, the time, the participation, all existed in the sphere of civilian leisure, demonstrating abundance rather than militarization. The German prisoners' interpretation revealed more about themselves than about America. They saw military training everywhere because their own society had been completely militarized. They couldn't conceive of activities that served no strategic purpose because Nazi Germany had eliminated such frivolities years earlier. In Germany by 1944, horses were extinct from civilian life, requisitioned for military transport. Young men were all in uniform. Public gatherings served propaganda purposes. Entertainment was carefully controlled to maintain morale and military readiness. The idea that America could sustain enormous weekly gatherings for pure entertainment, involving dangerous activities with valuable animals and working-age men, was beyond their conceptual framework. When some prisoners finally learned the truth that rodeo was purely entertainment with no military connection, the revelation was almost more disturbing than the misunderstanding. American abundance allowed it to waste resources on elaborate sport. The society was so wealthy, so secure, that it could afford to risk men and animals in dangerous entertainment while simultaneously fighting a two-ocean war. The psychological impact of this realization rippled through Camp Hearn's prisoner population. If Americans could sustain elaborate entertainment industries while waging global war, what chance did Germany have? If rodeo wasn't military training but genuine sport, what did that say about American confidence and resources? Burckhardt wrote in his diary on October 3, 1944, after learning the truth, "The rodeo was not military training. It was entertainment. This is somehow more frightening than if it had been training. They can afford to risk men, horses, resources on activities that serve no purpose except enjoyment. We have rationed entertainment to preserve resources. They have such abundance that entertainment continues during total war. I finally understand why we cannot win." The rodeo misunderstanding became legendary among former POWs. In post-war interviews, many cited it as the moment they understood the scale of American industrial and cultural power. They had been defeated not just militarily, but by a society so wealthy it could maintain civilian normalcy during wartime mobilization. The Robertson County Fair and Rodeo continued annually after the war, never knowing that German prisoners had once mistaken it for military training. Cowboys continued riding, bulls continued bucking, and crowds continued gathering, all demonstrating the vitality of American civilian culture that had so baffled prisoners of war who saw military purpose in everything. The Germans had been partly right about one thing. Rodeo did demonstrate American capability, just not military capability. It showed a society with such abundant resources, such cultural confidence, that it could sustain elaborate entertainment requiring horses, livestock, facilities, and participants, all while winning the largest war in human history. That capability, that abundance, that confidence had indeed contributed to American victory. Just not in the way prisoners thought when they first watched cowboys ride bucking broncos and believed they were witnessing military training. The story of German POWs and the Texas Rodeo reveals how total war distorted perception. Men from a militarized society couldn't recognize civilian entertainment when they saw it. Their assumption that everything must serve military purposes said more about Nazi Germany than about America. In the end, the rodeo's true nature, pure entertainment during wartime, proved more psychologically devastating than any military training demonstration could have been.